Seton Motley coming up later on in the hour. Thomas LeDuc of FTR Radio. Right now, from National Review, our friend Charles Cooke joins us on the program. Charles, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am excellent. I appreciate you coming on the program. And another must-read at National Review, Why Gun Control Advocates Lie About Guns. You've noticed as well that gun control advocates having a real hard time with this Pew survey that came out last week showing Americans now support gun rights. According to Pew, for the first time in their surveys in over 20 years, more than they support gun control by a pretty wide margin, 52 to 46%, I believe.
Yes. Of course, that can't be right because, as we all know, progress always wins. Guns are anti-progress. And so it must be wrong. Or at least it must be based on false consciousness or ignorance or selectively edited questions.
Anything to avoid acknowledging that American attitudes towards gun ownership are shifting and have shifted.
They are. Mike Lupica, who is a sports writer at the New York Daily News, is horrified at this recognition. And so he took to his column yesterday to slip in a few falsehoods. It's not the first time he's done this. And the column you're referring to went through those falsehoods. Yesterday's was the contention that the shooter at Newtown used an automatic weapon, which simply isn't true. Now, I understand that there are people who make this mistake. It should be said that most people make this mistake because progressives have been trying to make them make this mistake. There is the famous quote from Josh Sugarman of the Violence Policy Center, who came out a while back, I think in the late 80s, and said that the public's confusion over scary black guns, the tendency to presume that anything that looked, in their view, like a machine gun, was a tool in the hands of the anti-gun brigade. Now, I do accept that, although he is cynical as hell, he is right that some people genuinely make that mistake. But Mike Lupica is not among them. I went back and had a look at Mike Lupica's previous statements. He is rather obsessed with the AR-15. He's referenced it in column after column. He wrote a New York Daily News cover story about it, which we'll come to in a bit. And every time he's discussed it previously, he's identified it correctly as a semi-automatic weapon. In fact, he's explained, albeit briefly, what that means. And now suddenly it's an automatic weapon on the one day that he rails against the American public's refusal to adopt attitudes that he finds acceptable. Do we think that's a coincidence? I'm not sure.
Well, you say this is not the first mistake or the first error that Mike Lupica has made when he's been writing about the AR. At the time of the shootings of the Navy Yard, he wrote about how the killer there had used an AR. In fact, the headline, I think, was, same gun, different sleigh? Was that the headline?
Correct.
And again, we know that the killer at the Navy Yard used a shotgun, a very common shotgun that is legal to possess in even the most anti-gun of locales. But that didn't fit the narrative, though. And I'm not sure that Lupica has ever gone back to reassess this. I mean, as you say here in your piece, at the end of the day, shooting sad, automatic, schmautomatic, black gun scary, NRA crazy. The real question, are you on the right side? No, me good, you bad. Let's not get bogged down in the facts. And that really is about as deep as the gun control advocates get right now.
Yes, well, he made more than one mistake. That piece in the New York Daily News, which, as you say, was under the title Same Gun, Different Sleigh, and whose argument was predicated entirely on the presumption that the Navy Yard shooting had been carried out with an AR-15 when, in fact, it had been carried out with a shotgun, stayed up for 3 days without correction online, and then was only amended to include a mealy-mouthed correction. It wasn't pulled. None of the offending passages were struck through. Lupica said nothing about it himself. So he made a significant error, and he based his argument on a falsehood. But more than that, he reiterated his suggestion that the AR-15 is some sort of unparalleled supergun. And it's not. And he made factual claims that are false. He said that if the shooter at Newtown had taken a handgun into the school, he wouldn't have been able to kill so many people so quickly. That's not true. The worst shooting in American history was at Virginia Tech. And the shooter there had a 9mm handgun and a reasonably puny Walther .22. Not a Bushmaster, not an AR-15, not a so-called assault rifle, 2 handguns. It's just false. He also called the AR-15 a tool for hunting people. Well, let's go through the statistics. Of the murders that are committed with firearms in the United States, the vast majority, almost 80%, are committed with handguns. The next most deadly type is shotguns. Only then do we get to rifles of all sorts, not just assault weapons, AR-15, whatever you want to call them, of all sorts, 323 in 2011. Fewer murders than are committed with hands and feet, that are committed with blunt instrument, hammers, clubs, and so forth. This is not an especially deadly weapon, and it's not a weapon that is commonly used in crimes or in murders or in assaults. So he based the piece on a lie. He then created this hysterical fiction, which wasn't true. That's what he does. No wonder they're losing.
Well, and you look at the lawsuit that was filed yesterday, Charles, on behalf of some of the family members of those who died at Sandy Hook Elementary, and again, words can't express the sympathy that you have for these families. But the basis of the lawsuit itself seems to be that the AR platform should never, ever have been sold to civilians, going all the way back to the 1960s, that it was predicated on a military design, that there's no usefulness, no utility of the AR platform, and therefore companies that manufacture, companies that sell the AR platform, and presumably all semi-automatic rifles, would therefore be liable or negligent in their business practices and should be held accountable when those guns are used in crime.
Well, they have no case. It's apparent if you read the brief, as I did yesterday, that there's no case there at all. There's also a number of falsehoods in that brief. The notion that the AR-15 is only interesting or attractive to would-be killers is very quickly refuted by the fact that it's the most popular rifle in the United States. It is America's gun, I think NBC called it. It sells more than any other, and it sells more than any other, not because it's especially deadly. It's not. It uses 223 rounds in standard 5.56. You can get it in 30-06, I think, and also I've seen it in 2.2. But because it is ergonomically well designed, and almost everybody can shoot it. It's been responsible for a number of women taking up the shooting of long guns because it's built in a manner that diminishes recoil. People aren't buying this gun because they want to go and murder people. They're buying this gun because they want a rifle, and it's a good one. 5 million people have them in their homes. How many times do you hear about it being used? Almost never. In fact, so rarely is it used in crime that the FBI doesn't even keep statistics.
Listen, I'm not going to disagree with you, Charles. I think you're exactly right. I think that this is a a very weak argument to make, and all of that I think is going to be brought up. At the same time, it has to be noted, you never know what a judge is going to do.
No.
And that's, one of the, I think, concerning facts here. But clearly, this is as you say, this is the argument that's going to be used, that this is a class of firearms that is unsuitable for civilian use, is too dangerous for mere mortals, and therefore needs to go away. I think it's an argument. You and I were talking about this, I think, on Twitter the other day. To me, this is like saying that bicycles have become too fast. We've got all this composite materials, and they're lighter, they're faster than ever. We got to go back to velocipedes.
Well,
I'm going to hand you a ladder so you can climb up onto your new bicycle, Charles.
Right. I think it flows as well from the deliberate confusion we were talking about earlier, the attempt to sell semi-automatic as if it is a new fangled and crazy technology, when in fact it's a technology that has been common now for, 120 years? Almost every handgun sold in the last few years has been semi-automatic. This is not a new technology. I would say I imagine that this lawsuit has been filed not because the lawyers think that they can win, but because they're hoping that the defendants will settle. And I think there's a case in recent times in which that happened. I can't see them winning it on the merits. I think they not only have no case, but I think they will come up against laws that are harsh to protect gun manufacturers from this sort of frivolous fishing expedition. But if the manufacturer caves prematurely, then you see a different outcome. I don't think they will. I certainly hope they won't.
Well, I'm obviously with you. We will have to wait and see here, but I think you're right. I think that certainly was the attempt when we saw the pattern of litigation going back a decade or more now around the country, where you had municipalities file suits against gun manufacturers, and that was sort of the intent again to drag the cases out to make it cost death by 1,000 cuts, to go after the industry in that way. Listen, Charles, unfortunately, so I don't know how it happens, but every time we talk with you, all of a sudden we run out of time long before I'd like. But we do have to take a quick time out. I hope we can talk again soon, but if we don't talk before Christmas, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas.
I will, and to you.
All right. Thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure catching up, and I look forward to doing this again soon.
Talk to you soon.
Charles Cooke with us from National Review here on NRA News, Cam and Company.